In 2000, a 13-year-old boy named Justin Berry got his first webcam and signed up for a site where he could make new friends. He had hoped to meet some people his own age, but found that only older men were contacting him. What initially seemed to be innocent conversations soon led Justin down a dark path of crime, SA, and drug addiction. Let's investigate. If you enjoy internet mysteries and generally disturbing content, feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications for more content like this. If you're interested in supporting the channel, you can become a Ko-fi member or a channel member to gain access to uncut videos and other perks, or you can leave me a tip by clicking the thanks under this video. Thanks to anyone who considers this. This video will cover a range of potentially triggering topics, including CP, SA, addiction, and death. Viewer discretion is advised. You can click the link in the description to become a Ko-fi member and watch an uncut and ad-free version of this video, which features extra details that were unsuitable for this cut. In 2000, Justin Berry got his first webcam and signed up to spotlife.com, a directory of webcam users, using the name Justin Camboy. He wasn't exactly popular in school and was hoping to make some new friends online. He soon realised that there weren't many other teenagers on the site, most were older men. Even some who had posed as teenage girls eventually revealed their true identity. Without the option of chatting to anyone his own age, he continued talking to these men, naive to the dangers most of us are well aware of in 2024. Justin's new friends filled a void that had been present in his life for quite some time. His parents had divorced when he was younger, and he didn't have the best relationship with his father Newt, to say the least. Numerous reports of abuse had been made to the police, including one incident when Newt was arrested and charged after allegedly slamming Justin's head into a wall, causing a pretty serious injury that needed 7 stitches. The case went to trial and he testified, though Newt claimed it had been an accident and he was eventually acquitted. It sounds like Justin's relationship was better with his mother, who he lived with in Bakersfield, California, as well as his stepfather, but family members said he always craved affection from Newt. In some way, he found that with these men he was talking to online, who would compliment him all the time, telling him he was smart and handsome, words he'd always wanted to hear from his dad. The men began buying him gifts from his Amazon wishlist, everything from toys and CDs to computer equipment. He couldn't believe his luck, but never really stopped to question why they were being so generous. It wasn't long though before they started asking for something in return. One day, one of the men said he'd pay Justin $50 to take his shirt off on webcam. It was a bit of an odd request to Justin, but the way he saw it is that he took his shirt off at the pool without getting paid, so what was the difference? Then he was offered $100 to pose in his underwear, and things only escalated from here in a way that didn't feel that alarming to him at the time. He didn't see a problem being shirtless, and after he already took off his shirt, it didn't seem that much more to sit in his underwear, especially for double the pay. When he was offered even more to take his underwear off, he just went with it. It's not like he was meeting these men, so what's the worst that could happen? Plus, as a 13-year-old, there's no way he could find a job that would be paying even a fraction of what he was earning from this, with such little effort. Eventually, men on the site convinced Justin to start performing not safe for work acts on camera. He met other teenagers who were doing the same thing and would sometimes collaborate online with them. This sense of community allowed him to rationalize what he was doing. If others were doing the same, surely it's normal, right? It wasn't long before Justin set up his own site, hosted by a 23-year-old man named Ken Gole. Ken encouraged Justin to attend a computer camp at the University of Michigan in the summer of 2002, and he accepted the invitation. While at the camp, Ken SA'd Justin when he was just 14, and after promised it wouldn't happen again. But of course it did, and Justin later said that this was a turning point that sent him on a path to self-destruction. In his business, he became emboldened. He had come to realise that the people he was interacting with online would pay more than he had previously been charging. He opened up a new site and charged subscribers $45 a month, while offering private shows that he would charge $300 an hour for. He also began generating money in other illegal ways, such as plotting insurance scams, using his subscribers' credit cards to buy unauthorized items for himself, and even smuggling illegal immigrants into the US. The fellow teenagers he had once seen as colleagues were now his competition, and he did whatever he could to take them out. When one boy's site had been ranked higher on a popular portal, Justin emailed him anonymously, threatening to send the site to his father. The site quickly vanished after this. By this point, Justin was earning thousands of dollars, and he was doing a pretty good job of hiding it from his mum. She noticed he'd been splashing some cash, but he told her he had started a software development business and it was doing well. At one point, a man named Jilo Tunno offered Justin thousands of dollars to visit him in a hotel in Las Vegas, and he accepted. I'm sure you can guess what happened there, and this was the beginning of a somewhat long-term arrangement between the pair. Justin asked Jilo to sign a lease for an apartment just down the road from his house so he could use it to live stream in without being worried about his mum finding out. Jilo agreed, allowing Justin to tell his mum he was going to a friend's house whenever he needed to livestream, and she was none the wiser. In early 2003, Justin would be faced with the biggest threat to his business yet. One of his classmates had found his site and proceeded to distribute copies of the videos around school, leading to him being bullied and even beaten up. He asked his mum to let him leave school and start an online homeschooling program. Meanwhile, Justin had been in contact with his father, Newt, again recently. Their communication was going well until Newt suddenly vanished after being charged with insurance fraud related to massage clinics he owned. He fled to Mexico, where he contacted Justin, who asked if he could join him there. Before long, Justin was splashing his cash with his dad in Mexico, and when Newt asked where the money had come from, he confessed. Any normal parent who actually cared about their child's safety and well-being would have put an end to it immediately, but not Newt. He didn't care that his 16-year-old son was in danger, both physically and psychologically. His first thought was, how could he get in on this? He and Justin set up a new site, but this time, Justin wouldn't be performing alone. Newt helped him find S-workers he could pay to make content with to livestream on the site. This one was even more popular than his others in the past, so much so that Justin became one of the most well-known and sought-after underage, not-safe-for-work actors on the internet. While to his subscribers, he seemed to love what he did, and the money that came with it. Behind the camera, it was clearly starting to take a toll on him. He felt lost in life and spent some time traveling around the US. At one point, he briefly stopped live streaming and turned back to Christianity, even replacing all the content on his site with Bible verses. He was depressed and even contemplated taking his own life. With more money than a boy of his age knew what to do with, he had become addicted to drugs, and that was one of his main motivations to keep going. He opened yet another site, this time with the help of a man named Greg Mitchell, who had met and had inappropriate contact with him multiple times before. Greg encouraged Justin to recruit other minors to make similar content of their own for the site, and unsurprisingly, given the number of predators on the internet, it too was a success. Sometime after the creation of this site, Justin turned 18, and as the New York Times put it, He had crossed the line from underage victim to adult perpetrator. And this is where you might begin to question Justin's morality. When the New York Times published their article on this, some even condemned Justin's actions long before he turned 18, believing he knew exactly what he was doing, and even going as far as to suggest that he was the one manipulating the adults who had been paying for his content, or in-person services, since he was 13. Obviously, I disagree with this. It's not as simple as he knew what he was doing, when he was obviously groomed into it as a child by literal adults who actually did know what they were doing. Justin's mother had no idea what was going on. He didn't have any real-life friends to confide in who could encourage him to stop. Most of the people his own age who he associated with were people on these websites doing the same thing as him. Not to mention, when he told his father, he was just encouraged to do it more. These websites are absolutely sickening, but there's a million people that should be blamed before Justin, who I really believe got preyed on and sucked into this life with no real concept of the ramifications. And by the time he realised how much trauma all this had caused, he didn't really know how to get out of it. All that said, I can't excuse his actions after he turned 18. I don't mean his decision to continue his own performances, but recruiting other underage children to perform on his site. At this point, he knew how much damage this work had done to him. He is at least partly responsible for whatever trauma those children experienced as a result of joining his site. Thankfully, it wasn't long after his 18th birthday that he decided to break the cycle. In June 2005, an anonymous man contacted Justin, posing as a songwriter and asking various questions about him. Justin worried the man might be a law enforcement officer, but at this point he'd started to think that it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if he did get caught. At least it'd be a way out. The man asked him to meet in Los Angeles, and he accepted. At the meeting, the man identified himself as Kurt Eichenwald, a reporter who planned to write an article on inappropriate webcam content. Throughout a number of meetings, Justin showed Kurt his website and various messages he'd received from his subscribers. He began to trust Kurt, who eventually managed to convince him to end his business and quit the drugs. Once he sobered up, it seems the gravity of what he had been doing hit him like a brick wall. He told Kurt the names and locations of children he knew were being exploited on these sites and agreed to go to the police and confess everything. Stephen Ryan, a former federal prosecutor, had heard about Justin's story and offered to represent him. He was hoping to get immunity for Justin in return for him giving the prosecution all the evidence he had, which would surely land a lot of bad people in prison. Justin said he was willing to plead guilty for his part in all this and accept whatever punishment he'd get if the government would save the children he identified. This, of course, doesn't make up for him being partially responsible for those children being in that situation in the first place, but for what it's worth, does suggest he was genuinely remorseful in the end. His life was now at risk because he'd gone to the police, and specific individuals had actually told his business partner Greg that they would kill him if he'd revealed anything incriminating. Luckily for him, prosecutors agreed to Stephen's request that his client be granted immunity, and a few days later, Justin briefly returned to the sordid online world that had consumed his life for the past 5 years, but this time as a federal witness. He sent a message to Greg, who was suspicious about his disappearance, even asking him, "You act like you're in witness protection, are you?" Justin managed to convince him otherwise, and Greg invited him on an all-expenses-paid trip to Las Vegas with a 15-year-old boy who had also become a live streamer on these 6 sites. Justin asked if he was at home, and he was, as well as 2 minors who lived with him. He had already shared mountains of evidence with the FBI, enough to convince a jury that Greg was guilty well beyond reasonable doubt. He just needed to know his whereabouts, and now he'd got him. He immediately told one of the FBI agents he was on the phone to, and they rushed to Greg's house to arrest him. Meanwhile, Justin typed his final messages, confronting Greg on what he had done to him before logging off for the last time. After pleading guilty, Greg was eventually sentenced to 150 years in prison on numerous CP charges. It wasn't his first conviction of this nature, but clearly he hadn't learned his lesson the first time. Ken Gurley, who had hosted Justin's first site and essayed him when he was 14, was charged with 10 felony counts related to child SA. After police found his roommate Edward Mulak's hard drive, which contained thousands of inappropriate images, he was arrested too and charged with felony possession of CP. I wasn't able to find out if Ken or Edward were actually prosecuted. A few other people were arrested after Justin named them as accomplices, including Tim Richards, a marketer and principal of one of Justin's sites. But ultimately, the vast majority of people involved in some way faced no consequences at all. Justin gave the Justice Department the names of 1,500 clients and claimed to have never even been asked for more information about them. From 2006, Justin, sometimes accompanied by Kurt, the reporter who encouraged him to shut down his site and go to the police, has appeared on TV numerous times to tell his story, including on the Oprah Winfrey Show, Larry King Live, and 60 Minutes. In 2012, he appeared on an episode of Dr. Phil, and that appears to have been his last public appearance. I already mentioned some of the criticism directed at Justin for his involvement in all this, and although it might seem that Kurt was his knight in shining armour, there's actually some pretty concerning criticism against him too. Much of this centres around how Kurt found Justin in the first place. In his article for the New York Times, Kurt avoids explaining this, and exactly how he persuaded Justin to meet him in the first place. An accompanying reporter's essay goes into a little more detail on how he found Justin. Quote, "My reporting on webcam pornography began inadvertently last May, when an online search for financial fraud cases led to an odd posting describing what was said to be an international criminal investigation of a group of web companies. Searching for clues about that inquiry took me on a trail to other sites and posted messages. Eventually, I came across entries about someone named Justin, who, based on what I read, seemed to be an adult pornography star. Perplexed about how he was linked to a fraud case, I searched further at archive.org, which keeps copies of old websites, and discovered a photograph of a boy who appeared to be about 14 years old. This, supposedly, was Justin, not an adult, but a child. The original posting about the investigation proved to be a fake, and the more postings I read about Justin, including hundreds on a Yahoo message board set up by his fans, the more I came to suspect that his lurid story might also be an internet fable, but I wanted to be sure. Eventually, I found a lead, a screen name for Justin, which I could use to send him an instant message. My first attempts failed. Justin later said that he blocked these messages because the nature of my questions convinced him that I was with law enforcement. The only way to know if Justin was real, I decided, was to meet him in person, and to do that, I had to win the confidence of whoever was answering to his screen name. At the Times, it is standard practice for a reporter to identify himself at the outset, but doing that too soon would mean I might never know the truth. I decided to try to engage this person in conversation and persuade him to meet with me. At that time, I would disclose my identity, and only then would I begin the real reporting that could be used in an article. I contacted Justin again. This time I mimicked the tone of the members of the Yahoo site, simply identifying myself as a fan. From there began an on and off online conversation that went on for weeks, mostly about the music that I write as a hobby. Justin assumed that was my career, and I did not try hard to dissuade him. This reporter's essay might provide a little more detail, but it's still not really clear how Kurt came across Justin when looking up financial fraud cases. As it happens, Justin was also involved in fraud, but he hadn't been convicted, and I highly doubt the P-files he scammed would have been stupid enough to post about it openly online, so I don't think anything related to Justin would have been high up on the Google search results after a search for financial fraud cases. Kurt mentions finding hundreds of postings about Justin on a Yahoo message board, which could easily fool a reader into thinking he first heard about him on one of these boards. However, an article for New York Magazine by David Franz, who interviewed Kurt multiple times, reveals that this was not the case. Quote, "Between investigations, he was Googling for a new project. I was looking for something international," he has said, "and something involving dirty money. So he typed in Interpol, fraud alert, and investigations. That led him to a website called MexicoFriends.com, which sounded to Eichenwald like it might involve cross-border money laundering, but turned out to be an amateurish operation starring Justin Berry, who was 18 at the time, and a parade of beautiful Mexican women." So Kurt actually came across Justin's website, supposedly by searching for 3 different unrelated phrases. Although this part of the article states that Justin was 18 at the time, I don't think that was the case, as it quotes Kurt as saying the following after he saw a photo of Justin on the site. "Nobody could look at this image knowing that it was a site and not conclude this is about CP. A lot of people don't believe that Kurt just happened to stumble upon a CP site by searching for Interpol, fraud alert, and investigations, and I'd be inclined to agree. Generally speaking, CP is not something one just comes across without looking for it. In my nearly 20 years on the internet, even with some of the topics I've covered on this channel, like this one, I've never actually seen anything illegal involving children. I'm not accusing Kurt of actively searching for such content, but I can't say I personally believe his explanation. Furthermore, in both the original article and the reporter's essay, Kurt failed to disclose one pretty important detail. He sent Justin a check for $2,000 before they arranged to meet. This was revealed in an editor's note in both essays, where it was made clear that Kurt had not disclosed it to readers or his editors. Bizarrely, after he had convinced Justin to quit his site, he demanded the $2,000 back, saying, quote, "We paid that money to save your soul. That money was good money, and you took it for all of the worst reasons possible. You took it and debased yourself by accepting that money. You have to give it back." Honestly, I'm not sure if this sits right with me. A number of people have implied or outright accused Kurt of paying the $2,000 to get access to Justin's content, but I think it's a plausible enough reason that it was just to persuade him to agree to meeting. Kurt claims that his motivation for contacting Justin was to help him. He has sons himself, and the photo he found of Justin online looked a lot like his own son. It's undeniable that Kurt did help Justin. If it weren't for him, things may have ended very differently. Perhaps Justin would have never gotten away from that life, or maybe he'd have been convicted of the crimes Kurt indirectly helped him to get immunity for. Not to mention that Kurt was the one who got Justin to quit drugs and stuck by him throughout the detox process. All that said, he chose to pay Justin the $2,000, and I'm not sure how it helped him to get that money back. Justin had to get a loan from his grandmother to pay it back, so Kurt actually put him in debt. It's not like he was worried that Justin would use this money to buy drugs or anything, because it sounds like the money was already spent. I really don't see how it was beneficial to Justin in any way for Kurt to demand the money back. He'd, rightfully so, convinced Justin to abandon his only source of income, but now he was demanding $2,000 that he knew Justin didn't have. The only reason for this I can think of is because the New York Times forbids reporters paying the subjects of articles for information or interviews. This is something that is generally frowned upon in the industry anyway. So if Kurt hadn't demanded the money back, he may well not have been allowed to publish the article in the New York Times. Which leads into another question I have regarding Kurt's motivations. Which was more important to him? The safety and well-being of Justin and countless other minors and the prosecution of the predators involved, or the article he planned to write? Now, I don't know about anyone else, but if I ever came across a CP site, I would immediately report it to the police. What I certainly wouldn't do is pose as a predator myself, contact the victim of this site, send him $2,000 to meet me in person, demand that $2,000 back, and only after all that, encourage the victim to go to the police. At best, I can say that while I do believe Kurt did help Justin, I also think many of his actions were in his own self-interest. Perhaps he wanted to be known as the knight in shining armour who saved the victims, and the one to break and profit from the story. At worst, some have accused Kurt of actually being involved in all this in a less innocent way than he claims. Throughout Kurt's meetings with Justin, he gained access to his hard drives and a lot of data, including credit card transactions and messages between Justin and his subscribers. God knows what was on those hard drives, and I have no idea how much time he spent going through all this, but it was arguably wasted time. And in that time, God knows how many more children were recruited or even SA'd. I am sure more children could have been saved before anything happened, or at least more incidents could have been avoided, if Kurt went straight to the police rather than going through all this evidence himself. What's particularly questionable about Kurt is that he admitted that Justin had showed him a preview video for his website, featuring him and a 14-year-old child separately engaging in inappropriate acts. In what world was it necessary for Kurt to see that? He said himself that he knew the website was a CP site the first time he came across it. It's not like he needed confirmation, and if he did, that's still no reason to want to look at such content. Kurt did not disclose this information in either of his articles, though he said in the final paragraph of the original, quote, "While it was occasionally necessary to review offensive images, the Times avoided downloading CP or independently subscribing to sites containing such material." Now that's all well and good, but the thing is, Kurt didn't need to download CP or subscribe to the sites, because Justin willingly showed him the illegal content and handed over his hard drives. Kurt also, perhaps unintentionally, implied he visited other sites of a similar nature when he said that he contacted over a dozen other minors he believed were producing inappropriate content of themselves in an attempt to persuade them to stop. Again, I'm not sure how he even found these websites, and again, he could have just reported all these sites to the police and let them handle it. But then he wouldn't have been able to write such a sensational article on it. Yet another revelation came out in the run-up to the trial of Tim Richards, a 23-year-old who helped Justin run one of his sites. In order to prepare, he was given access to read-only copies of Justin's and Greg Mitchell's hard drives and computers used by the credit card processing company. Tim claimed in court papers that he found additional cash transfers from Kurt to Justin, separate to the $2,000 that was revealed by the editor. In fact, Kurt allegedly sent Justin thousands of dollars using fake names such as Roy and Andrew McDonald. Furthermore, emails from an Andrew McDonald using an AOL address of Kurt's allegedly included inappropriate comments to Justin. One said, "The lighting sucks, washed out, still worth 100. Another said, "I have other proposals for you that would get you even more money." I guess Kurt could try play all of this off by saying he only did all this to try and convince Justin that he was a fan and not the police, but it's honestly quite bizarre how he went about all this. Was it really necessary to send thousands of dollars? Was it necessary to create two different identities to communicate with Justin? Kurt's lawyer denied that the money was sent to purchase any of Justin's content, and while Kurt himself didn't deny the other payments, he failed to reveal them to the New York Times or the court. When they were revealed during Tim's trial, Kurt said that he had no independent memory of any of the PayPal expenses. He claimed that he suffers with short-term memory problems due to epilepsy, and he particularly struggles with remembering financial transactions. How convenient. Additionally, a computer expert hired by the defense presented evidence during Tim's trial showing that Kurt had high-level administrative access to Justin's site, allowing him to view everything on the site, make changes to it, and monitor the site's business. So was Kurt just an overzealous reporter who had become too involved and perhaps got carried away, or were there more nefarious reasons for his questionable actions? I really don't know. All I can say is he acted extremely unprofessionally and unethically on multiple occasions throughout his investigation, and it does make him look pretty suspicious, in my opinion. He faced a lot of backlash around the time all this came out and said in an interview, "I'm emotionally damaged, significantly damaged. The Justin thing was 2 years ago and it won't stop. What can I do to make it stop? It will never stop, you just don't understand." Justin said to New York Magazine about Kurt, quote, "He's a wonderful guy, and seeing him getting criticized makes me sick to my stomach." As for what happened to Justin after all this, here's where the story takes another dark turn. Within a couple of years, it seemed that he had totally turned his life around. He was attending college and even running a small web development business. As I said before, he was interviewed in various TV shows and seemed determined to raise awareness of CP and give insight into this sordid world he got mixed up in. Then in 2012, he more or less vanished from the public eye. I don't know if this was his decision for personal reasons, or if there just weren't any more interview offers, 7 years after the story was initially publicised. Either way, there isn't really any information online suggesting what he was doing with his life in the years that followed. That was until September 2018, when a Mexican news site reported that Justin had gone missing at the age of 32, and he was last seen on the 21st of August in a casino in Tijuana, Mexico. Another article on VerazInformer.com claimed that he had returned to Mexico after his grandmother's funeral and was taking an undisclosed medication that didn't require a prescription. It also said that he was emotionally unstable at the time and suffering with bipolar. There were also reports of him being addicted to drugs and homeless. Shortly after, one of Justin's friends posted in a Facebook group, quote, "RIP to my good friend of 10 plus years and fellow hacker Justin Berry. He went missing in Mexico a couple of weeks ago after a death in the family. He was murdered and there aren't many real leads. Mexico doesn't do dental records, so his body is just floating around in limbo for 8 weeks while they try to figure things out and wait on DNA results." There is a probate record with Justin's full name, Justin Newt Berry, that was filed on the 13th of August 2019. There's also a 46-minute YouTube video from December 2018 titled Justin Newt Berry, A Celebration of Life, which appears to show clips from his funeral and various photos of him throughout his life. So unfortunately, it's more or less confirmed that he is dead. However, neither the probate record nor the YouTube video give any indication of how he died, let alone confirming his friend's claim that he was murdered, and I wasn't able to find any other information. There are a couple of theories floating around though. One being that Justin was murdered by one of his former business associates or clients who still wanted revenge or to silence him after he went to the police and revealed everything. At the time, messages recovered from his associates revealed that a number of people wanted him dead. Someone had told Greg Mitchell they personally would kill Justin if he had revealed their secrets. This was when Justin was living in Mexico, where his site was also based, shortly before Greg was arrested. So it's possible that the wrong people found out he had returned to Mexico and went after him. However, Justin had gone to the police 13 years prior to his disappearance, and he'd stopped telling his story publicly around 6 years ago. If one of these predators wanted to kill Justin, surely the best time would have been 13 years ago, before he was able to testify in court. If there was anyone he didn't implicate then, he probably wasn't going to after so much time had passed. I guess revenge can't be totally ruled out as a motive though. Some people hold grudges for a long time, and perhaps this was the first time the perpetrator knew Justin's whereabouts and had the opportunity to get rid of him. It is worth remembering though that if the reports about him being homeless and addicted to drugs were true, it sounds like he relapsed and really wasn't doing well in general. This would have put him in a dangerous situation and opens up many more possibilities. Perhaps he died in a mugging gone wrong, or maybe he got sick and wasn't able to get medical treatment. Given the lack of credible information on his death, I'm wondering if he might have OD'd or even taken his own life. If he was murdered, you'd expect there to be news reports about it, possibly even arrest or court records if police found a suspect. But while there's just enough to make it seem fairly likely that he is unfortunately dead, the only source I could find stating he was murdered was the Facebook post by someone claiming to be his friend, which isn't exactly a credible source. Most of the time when people die from OD or suicide, the cause isn't mentioned in their obituaries, so I think that's likely what happened here. I also watched a bit of the Celebration of Life YouTube video, and to me, it really wasn't giving the vibe that Justin was murdered. I absolutely could be wrong, but the demeanour of the people who were speaking, including his sister, came across to me like his death wasn't a huge shock to them, which of course it would have been if he was murdered, and they seem to have made peace with it. Someone mentioned in their speech that Justin had a daughter in 2012, which I guess may have been the reason he stepped out of the public eye. So it's really just a tragic situation all round. Regardless of your thoughts about Justin after he turned 18, for a long time he was a victim, and eventually he managed to break the cycle and leave behind a legacy that I hope will play a part in saving children in the future. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts and theories in the comments, plus any suggestions you might have for a future video. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Huge thank you to my Ko-fi members and channel members whose names are on screen now. I really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time in a new video.